At my mother's funeral, my brother announced that the house had already been sold. He didn't know that my mother had left me a single key. My name is Emily Harper, and on the day of my mother's funeral, my older brother stood in the middle of the memorial lunch, raised a glass of water, and said, "I think Mom would be happy to know that the house will finally be useful to the family. The deal is almost finalized." The room went silent. Someone nodded. Someone started talking about real estate prices. And I sat there, staring at a small brass key in the pocket of my black coat. The key my mother had placed in my hand 3 days before she died. The key that was supposed to change everything, but my brother still didn't know about it. Before we begin, write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I always love knowing where I'm being heard from. Now let me tell you how it all began. I was 12 years old when my father died of a heart attack. After his death, our old house on Hollow Street became an entire world for my mother. The house was built by my grandfather. White facade, green shutters, a wide front porch, an old maple tree by the gate. Every board in that house held memories. Every corner was part of our family. My brother David was 7 years older than me. Even as a child, he always saw things differently. When my mother told stories about the house, I heard memories. David heard property value. When my mother showed us my grandmother's old china set, I saw family history. He saw antiques. When my father spoke about family legacy, I heard love. He heard money. Back then, I didn't yet understand that difference. But my mother did. After my father's death, David moved to another state. He rarely called. He came to visit even less. But every time he did, he asked the same question. "Have you thought about selling the house?" My mother always gave the same answer. "Not while I'm alive." He would smile, change the subject. But a few months later, he would ask again. I stayed. I studied at a nearby college. Every weekend I came home to help my mother. We painted the fence, raked leaves, fixed the porch, baked apple pies, drank tea on the veranda. Simple things, the kind of things that later become the most valuable memories. A year before she died, my mother began to weaken quickly. At first, she forgot small things. Then she became tired after short walks. Then the doctors found a tumor. When they said treatment would no longer help, my mother simply nodded, as if she had known for a long time. On the way home, she looked out of the car window. Then she said, "Promise me something." "What?" "Never let fear make decisions for you." At the time, I didn't understand those words. Later, I did. In her final months, we spent all our time together. David visited a few times, and every time the conversation somehow circled back to the house. That land is worth a fortune now. You could build several cottages here. Developers would pay good money. My mother stayed silent, but I noticed how her eyes changed. She listened carefully. She remembered. She evaluated. 3 days before she died, she asked me to come in the evening. The house was quiet. Only one lamp was on in the kitchen. My mother was sitting at the table. In front of her was a small wooden box. She opened it. Inside was an old brass key, worn, heavy, very old. She placed it into my palm. "Keep it safe." "What is it for?" "When the time comes, you'll know." "Why not tell me now?" My mother smiled, a tired smile. "Because some things people only understand when they're ready to hear them." Then she covered my hand with hers and added, "Don't give it to anyone. Never." 3 days later, she was gone. The funeral ended closer to evening. The guests began to leave. Some hugged me. Some offered standard words of condolence. Some talked about my mother. But I could barely hear anything. In my head, David's words kept repeating over and over. "The house has almost been sold." Not, "We are discussing it." Not, "We are considering options." Not, "We are thinking about it." Sold. as if it was already decided, as if my mother had only been dead for a few hours and he was already calculating profit. When the last guests left, I stayed alone in the kitchen, in the exact same place where my mother had given me the key. I took it out of my pocket. Heavy, worn, old. I stared at it for several minutes. Then I put it back. That night, I wasn't ready to solve mysteries. I just wanted to survive the night, but sleep never came. Around 2 a.m, I heard footsteps. David. He thought I was asleep. I heard the office door open, then the sound of drawers opening, then another, then another. He was searching for something. 40 minutes, maybe an hour. In the morning, I found the office turned upside down. Files were scattered everywhere. Documents were on the floor, drawers left open. David was drinking coffee as if nothing had happened. What happened in the office? He shrugged. I was looking for insurance documents. He lied. I knew it immediately. He was looking for something, but he didn't find it. And for some reason, my hand instinctively went to my coat pocket. The key was still there. And for the first time, I started to wonder, what if that was exactly what he was looking for? 3 days after the funeral, David came again. This time, he wasn't alone. He brought a man in an expensive suit, around 45 years old, holding a folder under his arm. They stood by the porch discussing something. Then they started walking around the property, measuring distances, taking photos, inspecting the house. I stepped outside. Who is this? David smiled, too quickly, too forced. Just an appraiser. For what? For the sale. I felt a cold drop inside me. Sale of what? He looked at me like he was explaining something obvious to a child. The house. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Mum died 4 days ago. That's exactly why we need to act quickly. You're already looking for buyers? Emily, be realistic. The house is huge, old, expensive to maintain. It doesn't make sense to keep it. We'll sell it, split the money, and everyone goes their separate way. I looked at the man I had known my entire life, but in that moment, he felt like a complete stranger. And if I don't agree? He smirked. You don't have a choice. After that, he turned and walked to the car, and I stayed standing on the porch. That was the moment I realized the fight had already begun. The next day, I decided to understand the key. The house was empty, silent. Only the old clock in the living room marked the seconds. I started going through the rooms, trying to find a lock, anything that might fit. Closets, drawers, old chests, nothing. Almost 2 hours passed. I was starting to think I was wrong, and then my eyes stopped on the old secretary desk. It had stood in the office for more than 20 years. Dark wood, carved handles, multiple small drawers. My father once said it belonged to my great-grandfather. I knelt down, ran my hand along the lower panel, and felt a strange indentation, very small, almost invisible. My heart started racing. I inserted the key. It fit perfectly. With a soft click, part of the panel slid forward, a hidden compartment, a real hidden compartment. My hands began to shake. Inside were 3 things: a thick envelope, a folder of documents, and a small photograph. I recognized it instantly. It showed my mother and father, young, happy, standing on the porch of this very house. On the back, my mother had written, "If you are holding this, it means I can no longer explain everything myself." My breath caught. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, my mother's handwriting, neat, careful, as if she was sitting right beside me. The first lines made me freeze. "Emily, if you are reading this letter, it means David is already trying to sell the house. So I must tell you the truth." I read the sentence twice, then again. My mother knew. She knew everything in advance. And that was the moment I realized that the story of this house was far more complicated than I had ever imagined.
and the documents in the folder were only the beginning. When I opened the first page, I saw the name of a lawyer, the date of registration, and the name of a trust fund that no one in our family had ever heard of, except my mother, and possibly David. But if he really knew about it, then that was exactly why, in the last few months, he had been so desperately trying to get his hands on the documents. I was sitting on the office floor. In front of me lay my mother's letter. Next to it, the folder of documents. Outside, it had started to rain. Drops slowly slid down the window, and I read line after line, and with every page, I understood more. My mother truly knew. She knew that one day David would try to sell the house. That was exactly why she began preparing in advance, not a month ahead, not a year ahead, 8 years before her death. Emily, I love your brother. He is my son, and I will always love him. But love should not be blinding. After your father's death, David began making decisions I could not be proud of. First, there were loans, then debts, then new loans to cover the old ones. He thought I didn't notice. But mothers notice more than children think, especially when those children are already grown. I stopped. My mother had never told me about David's debts. Never. All I knew was that he kept changing jobs, moving, starting some projects, then shutting them down. But I never knew the details. Now I was beginning to understand.
I continued reading. 3 years ago, David asked me to sign some documents. He said it was a formality for the bank. I did not sign. Later, the lawyer explained to me that I would effectively become a guarantor for his loan. If he stopped paying, the bank would have the right to claim the house. That day, I understood one thing. If I did nothing, after my death, this house would disappear. My chest tightened. I remembered that year. I remembered how David had suddenly visited several times in a row. How he spent long hours talking to my mother in the kitchen. How he left each time frustrated. Now, everything was falling into place. I opened the folder. On top was a document with an official seal, a family asset trust agreement, date of registration, 8 years ago. Below it, my mother's signature, the lawyer's signature, witness signatures, everything official, everything legal. I turned the page and saw the title, The Harper Family Trust. Below it was a list of assets, the house on Hollow Street, the land plot, a small investment account, several bank deposits. All property had been transferred into the trust many years ago. Legally, the house had not belonged to my mother directly for a long time. It belonged to the trust. And the trust was managed by a designated lawyer. A cold feeling ran down my spine. If this was true, then David could not sell the house. Not at all. Not in any way. Even after my mother's death. I kept reading. On the next page, I saw my name. I read it several times, then again, because I couldn't believe it. After my mother's death, I would become the sole administrator of the trust, not the owner, not the heir, the administrator. There was a huge difference. My mother had emphasized it in the letter. The house does not belong to you. It belongs to our family. But I trust you to make decisions, because you always cared about people before money. My eyes stung. At that moment, a car stopped outside. I flinched. I went to the window. David's car was in the driveway. He had come again. And somehow, exactly now, as if he had felt it. I quickly put the documents back into the folder. I sealed the letter in the envelope, closed the hidden compartment, put the key in my pocket. A minute later, the front door slammed. Emily? My brother's voice echoed through the hallway. I'm here. He entered the office and immediately started looking around, too carefully, too observantly for someone who had simply come to talk. What are you doing? Sorting through Mom's papers. Did you find anything important? Too fast a question. Too specific. I looked him straight in the eyes. Like what? He shrugged. I don't know. Documents, a will, Bank papers? No, I lied. For the first time in my life, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. David was silent for a few seconds, then slowly nodded. But I saw it. He didn't believe me. By the way, he sat on the edge of the desk. I'm meeting the buyers tomorrow. My heart jumped. Already? It's a good offer, you can't pass it up. The house isn't even officially transferred yet. It's just paperwork. He said it too confidently, as if he was completely sure he was right, or pretending to be. Before leaving, he stopped in the doorway, turned back to me, and said something that made me even more alert. If you find any of Mum's documents, make sure you show them to me, especially old papers. They might be important. Then he smiled and left. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner. Then I immediately took out the letter again and read the last page. That's where Mum wrote the words that changed everything. If David starts rushing the sale, it means he is in serious financial trouble. In that case, contact the person whose name is on the last page of the folder immediately. He knows the whole truth, and he will help you protect the house. I turned to the last page. There was only one business card, white, simple, no extra text. It read, Michael Rains, attorney, trustee of the Harper Family Fund, and below it, a phone number. I stared at the card for a few seconds, then I dialed the number. Ring, another ring, a third. Finally, a man answered. Michael Rains speaking. I took a deep breath. My name is Emily Harper. Silence. 2 seconds. 3. Then his voice changed. Emily, I've been waiting for this call for years. When can you come? And in that moment, I understood. Mum hadn't just prepared a letter. She had prepared an entire plan. And tomorrow, I would learn the part of the story my brother didn't even know existed. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Outside, it was drizzling, that fine autumn rain that makes the world grey and quiet. I lay there staring at the ceiling. Today the lawyer was coming. Today the safe would be opened. Today I would finally learn what Mum had been trying to tell me, and why she left that key only to me. Downstairs I could already hear footsteps. My brother was awake. I heard the front door slam. Then again. He was nervous, very nervous, and I knew exactly why. If the safe contained documents capable of destroying his plans, then everything would change today. At exactly 10 in the morning, a dark car stopped in front of the house. A man in his 60s stepped out, tall, grey-haired, wearing an expensive coat. He introduced himself. My name is Thomas Reed. I was your mother's attorney for the past 15 years. Michael appeared on the porch a few seconds later, with a forced smile. Hello, we're ready. Reed looked at him calmly, too calmly, the way people look when they know far more than they say. We went down to the basement. The safe stood behind an old cabinet, the same one Mum never allowed anyone to move. Thomas looked at me. Do you have the key? I took it out of my pocket. Michael watched every movement closely. I inserted the key. The lock clicked, but the door didn't open. Now the code, the lawyer said. Which code? He looked at me. Your date of birth. I froze. Mum had made my birthday the code, not Michael's, not hers, not my parents' wedding date. Mine. I entered the numbers. Click. The door opened. Inside were 3 thick folders, several envelopes, and a small wooden box. Michael stepped forward, too quickly, but the lawyer raised his hand. The documents first. He took the first folder, opened it, started reading. After a minute, Michael's face changed. After 2, it turned completely white, because the first folder contained financial records from the past 8 years, detailed, with bank statements, signatures, transfers, and names, many names, including my brother's. What is this? I asked. The lawyer turned a page. This is a loan journal.
Michael straightened sharply. Don't start. But Thomas continued. Over the past 8 years, your mother regularly helped your brother financially. Large sums, house, business, cars, loans, personal debts. I looked at Michael. He stayed silent. The total amount of assistance is $487,000. I thought I had misheard, nearly $500,000. Michael looked away. That was a long time ago. No, the lawyer said calmly. The last transfer was 7 months ago. I looked at my brother, the same man who yesterday told relatives that Mum had supposedly left everything to him, the same man who said he cared for her the most, the same man who had already sold her house, $500,000, over 8 years. Mum had given him almost $500,000, and it still wasn't enough. Thomas opened the second folder. And that's when the real earthquake began. Because inside were the house documents, the originals, all of them, and the first thing I saw was the owner's name. Not Michael, not Mom, not both of us, but a legal trust, created 5 years ago. What does this mean? I asked. Thomas removed his glasses. It means the house was never your brother's. Michael slammed his hand on the table. Enough. But the lawyer didn't even look at him. 5 years ago, your mother transferred the house into a family trust. According to the terms, after her death, the sole administrator becomes Emma. That is you. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. Michael had already sold the house, signed a contract, taken a deposit, bragged about it at the funeral. But the house didn't belong to him. It never had. Never. Silence lasted a few seconds. Then my brother whispered, "No." Thomas looked at him. "I'm afraid so." "No, that's impossible. Mum promised me. The documents say otherwise." "She said the house was mine." "Perhaps," the lawyer replied. "But 5 years ago she signed completely different papers." For the first time, I saw fear in Michael's eyes. Real fear. Not irritation, not anger, but fear. Because he was beginning to understand the scale of the problem. If the house belongs to the trust, then his sale is invalid. If the sale is invalid, then the buyer will demand their money back. If the buyer demands their money back, then questions will start. Very uncomfortable questions. Thomas opened the third envelope. And there is something else. He handed me a letter. On the envelope was my mother's handwriting. Only 3 words. "Open after the safe." My hands trembled. I slowly opened the envelope and began to read. Emma, if you are reading this letter, then exactly what I feared has happened. It means Michael has once again put money above family, and it means you are once again trying to save everyone, even at the cost of your own happiness. Don't do it. I know my son, I love him, but I also know he will try to convince you to give in.
He will talk about family, about duty, about love, about how hard it is for him. I have heard those words for many years. Please, do not give him this house. Not because he is a bad person, but because every time he is saved from consequences, he becomes weaker. Sometimes love is not helping. Sometimes love is letting a person face the results of their own decisions. The house is yours not because you are my favorite child. I do not have favorite children. The house is yours because you are the only one who loved it more than its price. You always asked how to fix the roof. Michael always asked how much the land was worth. That is the difference. Take care of yourself. I love you. Mum. When I finished reading, absolute silence filled the basement. No one spoke, no one moved, not even Michael. He was staring at the floor, as if hearing the truth about himself for the first time. And then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and went even paler. "Who is it?" Thomas asked. Michael didn't answer. But I saw the name, the house buyer, and I understood. The real problems were just beginning. The phone kept ringing. Michael stared at the screen as if he were holding not a smartphone, but an explosive device. The buyer's name lit up the display. Robert Haynes. The man he had already promised the house to. The man who had already transferred the deposit. The man who now, most likely, knew that the deal was falling apart. The call ended. A message came in. Then another. And another. Michael didn't open them. Thomas Reed calmly closed the folder. "I think you should answer." Michael raised his eyes. The confidence was gone. Only anxiety remained. "This is none of your business." "You are mistaken," the lawyer replied calmly. "Now it is very much my business." I stayed silent, because for the first time I didn't feel the need to speak. The facts spoke for themselves. The documents spoke for themselves. My mother's letter spoke for itself. The phone rang again. This time Michael answered. "Robert." The voice on the other end was so loud I could hear fragments of it. "What do you mean the house isn't yours? Calm down. I just spoke to my lawyer." "Robert, listen. You said you were the owner." Michael ran a hand over his face. "The situation is more complicated." "I don't care about the situation. I care about my money." The call ended. Silence filled the basement. Thomas looked at his watch. "I think this is only the beginning." And he was right. 2 hours later, the house already felt like a war headquarters. Michael's phone never stopped ringing. Relatives, friends, the buyer, banks, someone else. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. In front of me lay my mother's letter. I was reading it for the 4th time, every line, every word, especially one sentence. Sometimes love is letting a person face the consequences of their decisions. All my life, I did the opposite. All my life, I smoothed things over. I gave in. I stayed silent. I forgave. I rescued. Even when no one rescued me. And for the first time in my life, my mother asked me not to do that. By evening, relatives began arriving. Not all of them. Only the curious ones. The loud ones. The ones who believed they had the right to interfere. First came Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister. She had always considered herself an expert in other people's problems. The moment she walked in, she immediately started. Michael said there was a misunderstanding. I looked up. A misunderstanding? Of course. Family should resolve things together. I couldn't help but smile. Interesting. When Michael was selling the house without my consent, no one mentioned family. But now that his plans had collapsed, family suddenly mattered a lot. Within half an hour, about 8 people were sitting in the living room. All discussing one thing. The house. Only the house. Not Mom. Not the funeral. Not how we felt. Just the house. As if she had never existed. As if her entire life had been reduced to square meters and property value. And then I understood something my mother had understood long before me. She had foreseen all of this, absolutely everything. Around 7 in the evening, the doorbell rang again. This time, an unfamiliar man arrived. Grey suit, briefcase, professional smile. "Good evening, my name is Daniel Carter. I represent the interests of Robert Haynes, the buyer of the house." The living room fell completely silent. Michael went pale. "Why are you here?" "To talk." Daniel opened his briefcase, took out documents, placed them on the table. "As I understand it, my client transferred a deposit of $75,000. Several relatives exchanged surprised looks. $75,000? No one expected that amount. Not even me." Michael tensed. And now we would like to know when the funds will be returned." The room became even quieter. Aunt Linda broke the silence first. "Of course Michael will return the money, right?" My brother didn't answer. And that's when I understood. He couldn't return it, because the money was already gone. The buyer's lawyer realized it at the same moment I did. I saw it in his eyes. He noticed the pause, too long a pause. "Mr. Harper, where are the funds?" Michael looked down. "It's completely gone.
Silence. Absolute. Terrifying. What do you mean, gone? Part of it went to debts. Aunt Linda suddenly turned to him. You spent the deposit. I was going to return it after the deal. The lawyer slowly closed the folder. Very slowly. So slowly it became frightening. Then we have a serious problem. After he left, a real scandal erupted. Relatives attacked Michael, all at once, all loudly, all indignantly. But the reason wasn't morality, not mom, not justice. The reason was much simpler. They realized the situation was far worse than they thought. It was no longer about the house. It was about money, big money, a possible lawsuit, debts, fraud. And suddenly, no one wanted to stand next to the person who might drag them down with him. I quietly went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and for the first time in days, I felt silence. Real silence. No shouting, no demands, no pressure. Later that evening there was a knock. I opened the door. Michael was standing there, alone, without relatives, without an audience, without confidence. He looked older, much older, as if he had aged 10 years in one day. Can I come in? I silently stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the chair. For a few seconds, we said nothing. Then he spoke, quietly, very quietly. Do you think I'm a monster? I looked at him for a long time, then shook my head. No. He looked up, surprised. Then what? I think you are someone who convinced himself for too long that he is entitled to everything. He didn't answer, because there was nothing to argue with. I continued. You know what the worst part is. It's not that you tried to sell the house, not that you deceived the buyer, not that you hid documents. The worst part is that you truly believed you were right. Michael lowered his head, and for the first time, he didn't argue. A minute later, he took a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. There's something else, I frowned. What is it? I found it this morning, in the second envelope from the safe. I carefully took the sheet, unfolded it. It was a document, old, with my mother's signature. And when I read the first line, my heart stopped, because it said, if my children begin arguing over the house, open attachment number 7. I looked up. What is attachment number 7? Michael looked at me. I don't know, but the lawyer said it is stored separately, with the notary. And Mum instructed it to be opened only under one condition, if a conflict over inheritance arises between us. I felt a chill run down my spine, because Mum had prepared for everything again, even this, and if attachment number 7 exists, then maybe we still don't know the full truth. That night, I barely slept. The document lay on the nightstand beside me. Just one sentence, just a few words, but they wouldn't leave my mind. If my children begin arguing over the house, open attachment number 7. Mom wrote this many years ago, long before the illness, long before the funeral, long before Michael announced the sale of the house, long before I received the key. And yet she knew. Somehow, she knew. Not the details, not the dates, not the exact events, but she knew the main thing, that one day we would end up here, on opposite sides of the table, on opposite sides of the truth. At 8 in the morning, Thomas Reed called me. Come to the office. I've already contacted the notary. Attachment number 7 exists. I sat up sharply in bed. And? It is sealed. According to your mother's instructions, it can only be opened under 2 conditions. Which are? First, there must be a dispute between the heirs. That already happened. Second, both children must be present for the opening. I looked out the window. Rain had started outside. Did Michael agree? Thomas paused. He will be there. 2 hours later, we were sitting in a small notary office on the outskirts of the city. Me, Michael, Thomas, and the notary, an elderly woman named Sarah Milton. She brought a metal box. On the lid was an old seal, intact, untouched, all these years. "Your mother left it here 9 years ago," Sarah said, "and strictly forbade it from being opened early." Michael let out a nervous laugh. "Of course she did. She planned everything." No one responded, because it was true. Sarah broke the seal, opened the box. Inside was a thick envelope and a flash drive. I frowned. "A flash drive?"
"Yes," the notary said. "Your mother insisted the video be stored separately from the letter." My heart started beating faster. A video. Mum recorded a video. For us. A few minutes later, we were in a conference room. A screen hung on the wall. Thomas plugged in the flash drive. An image appeared. At first blurry, then it sharpened. And I saw my mother. Alive. Smiling. Not sick. Not exhausted. The way she had been years ago. For a few seconds, I stopped breathing. Michael froze too. Because for the first time after the funeral, we saw her again. Real. Mum looked directly into the camera and smiled. "If you are watching this video, then exactly what I feared has happened." She shook her head slightly. "And most likely, you are arguing over the house." I heard Michael exhale heavily. Mum was speaking directly to him. "Michael," he flinched. "If you are angry at your sister right now, stop. Please, don't be angry at her. Be angry at me. This was my decision, not hers." I saw my brother lower his gaze. Mum continued. 9 years ago, I realized something. The house will not destroy our family. Money will not destroy our family. Secrets will. And today I will tell you what I have hidden all my life." The room fell silent. Completely silent. I felt unease rising. What else did we not know? Mum took a deep breath and said, "Over the past 10 years, I rewrote my will twice. The first time, the house was supposed to go to Michael. My brother suddenly lifted his head. Mum seemed to expect that reaction. "Yes, to you, because back then I believed you were ready." I turned to him. He was staring at the screen without blinking. "But then something happened that you never even noticed." Mum opened a folder in front of her. "Over 4 years, I loaned you nearly $500,000. I already knew that number, but Michael heard it as if for the first time. Every time you said it was the last time. Every time you promised to fix everything. Every time you promised to repay it. And every time you came back asking for more help." Mum's voice wasn't angry. It was tired, truly tired. "At some point I realized I wasn't helping you. I was preventing you from growing up." Michael sat motionless. I had never seen him like this. No excuses, no arguments, no attempts to justify himself, only silence. And Mom continued. "Emma never asked for money. Never. Even when things were hard. They're not fully available right now." Silence. Absolute. Terrifying. "What do you mean, not available?" "Part of it went to debts." Aunt Linda suddenly turned to him. "You spent the deposit? I was going to repay it after the deal." The lawyer slowly closed his folder. Very slowly. So slowly it felt unsettling. "Then we have a serious problem." When he left, chaos erupted. Relatives turned on Michael, all at once, all loudly, all in outrage. But the reason wasn't morality, not Mom, not justice. The reason was much simpler. They realized the situation was far worse than they thought. It was no longer about the house. It was about money, big money, a potential lawsuit, debts, fraud. And suddenly, no one wanted to be near someone who might drag them down with him. I quietly went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and for the first time in days, I felt silence. Real silence. No shouting, no demands, no pressure. Later that evening, there was a knock. I opened the door. Michael stood there, alone. No relatives, no audience, no confidence. He looked older, much older, as if he had aged 10 years in a single day. "Can I come in?" I silently stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the chair.
We stayed silent for a few seconds. Then he spoke, quietly, very quietly. "Do you think I'm a monster?" I looked at him for a long time, then shook my head. "No." He looked up, surprised. "Then what?" "I think you're someone who spent too long convincing himself he was entitled to everything." He said nothing, because there was nothing to say. I continued. "You know what's the scariest part? It's not that you tried to sell the house, not that you deceived the buyer, not that you hid documents. The scariest part is that you truly believed you were right." Michael lowered his head, and for the first time, he didn't argue. A minute later, he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. "There's something else." I frowned. "What is it?" "I found it this morning, in the second envelope from the safe." I carefully took the paper, unfolded it. It was a document, old, with Mom's signature. And when I read the first line, my heart stopped. Because it said, "If my children start fighting over the house, open appendix number 7. I looked up. "What is appendix number 7? Michael looked at me. "I don't know. But the lawyer said it's stored separately, with the notary, and Mom instructed it to be opened only under one condition: if a conflict over inheritance begins between us." A chill ran down my spine. Because Mom had planned even this, everything. And if appendix number 7 exists, then maybe we still don't know the whole truth. That night I barely slept. The document lay on my bedside table, just one sentence, just a few words. But they wouldn't leave my mind. "If my children start fighting over the house, open appendix number 7. Mum wrote this many years ago, long before her illness, long before the funeral, long before Michael announced the sale, long before I received the key. And yet she knew. Somehow, she knew. Not the details, not the dates, not the exact events, but she knew the main thing, that one day we would end up here, on opposite sides of the table, on opposite sides of truth." At 8 in the morning, Thomas Reed called me. "Come to the office. I've already contacted the notary. Appendix number 7 exists." I sat up sharply in bed. "And?" "It's sealed. According to your mother's instructions, it can only be opened under 2 conditions." "What conditions?" "First, there must be a dispute between the heirs. That already happened. Second, both children must be present when it's opened." I looked out the window. It was raining. Michael agreed. Thomas paused. "He will be there." 2 hours later, we were sitting in a small notary office on the outskirts of the city. Me, Michael, Thomas, and the notary, an elderly woman named Sarah Milton. She brought a metal box, an old seal on top, intact, untouched, all these years. "Your mother left this 9 years ago," Sarah said, "and strictly forbade it from being opened early." Michael let out a nervous laugh. "Of course she did. She planned everything." No one answered, because it was true. Sarah removed the seal, opened the box. Inside was a thick envelope and a flash drive. I frowned. "A flash drive?" "Yes," the notary said. "Your mother insisted the video be stored separately from the letter." My heart started beating faster. A video. Mum recorded a video. For us. A few minutes later, we were in a conference room, a screen on the wall. Thomas connected the flash drive. An image appeared, blurry at first, then it sharpened. And I saw Mom, alive, smiling, not sick, not exhausted, the way she used to be years ago. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. Michael froze too, because for the first time since the funeral, we saw her again, real. She looked straight into the camera and smiled. "If you are watching this, it means what I feared has happened." She shook her head slightly. "And you are probably fighting over the house." I heard Michael exhale heavily. Mum was speaking directly to him. "Michael," he flinched. If you are angry at your sister right now, stop. Please, don't be angry at her. Be angry at me. This was my decision, not hers. I saw him lower his eyes. Mum continued. 9 years ago, I understood something. A house does not destroy a family. Money does not destroy a family. Secrets do. And today I will tell you what I hid all my life. The room fell silent. I felt uneasy. What else did we not know? Mum took a deep breath. Over the past 10 years, I rewrote my will twice. The first time the house was supposed to go to Michael. He suddenly lifted his head. Mum seemed to expect it. Yes, to you? Because at that time I believed you were ready. I turned to him. He was staring at the screen without blinking. But then something happened that you didn't even notice. Mum opened a folder in front of her. Over 4 years, I lent you almost $500,000. I already knew that number, but Michael looked like he was hearing it for the first time. Every time you said it was the last time, every time you promised to fix everything, every time you promised to repay it, and every time you came back for more help. Her voice wasn't angry, it was tired, truly tired. At some point, I realized I wasn't helping you. I was preventing you from growing up. Michael sat completely still. I had never seen him like this. No excuses, no arguments, no attempts to justify himself, just silence. And Mom continued. Emma never asked for money, never, even when she struggled, even when she could have asked. She solved her problems herself, so I changed the documents, not because I love her more, but because I trust her more. There is a huge difference. My eyes burned with tears. Because I had never heard these words before. Mum rarely spoke about feelings. She showed them through actions. But now she said everything directly. Then something happened no one expected. Mum picked up another sheet of paper. And now the second reason appendix number 7 exists. I frowned. A second reason? Mum smiled slightly. There is another inheritance. Not the house, not money, not investments. Something far more important. I saw Thomas raise his eyebrows in surprise. Even he didn't know. Mum continued. 23 years ago, your father started building a company with his best friend. It was a small business, almost unknown. When your father died, his share should have gone to me. But I refused. Instead, I signed an agreement. Since then, the share has been held in a separate family fund, until my death. My heart started racing. Michael tensed too. What company? He whispered. But the answer came immediately. Mum said the name. And Thomas straightened sharply. Because he knew it. I knew it too. The entire city knew it. What once was a small business had become a massive regional network, worth millions. Mum looked directly into the camera. If you are sitting together now, then it is time to know the truth. In the family fund, there is a share worth approximately $2 million. My breath caught. Michael closed his eyes, and Thomas quietly said, "Oh my God." But Mum wasn't finished. The most important part was still ahead. These funds do not belong to either of you individually. They belong to both of you, only together. A document appeared on the screen. According to the fund terms, the money can only be released with a joint decision from both heirs. If one refuses, the fund remains frozen, indefinitely. The room fell into absolute silence. I slowly turned to Michael. He was staring at the screen, not moving, not blinking. Mum had planned everything again. Even after her death, she had placed us in front of a choice: continue the war, or become a family again. The video was ending. Mum smiled. That familiar smile from my childhood. If you reach this point, then not everything is lost. I left the house to Emma, and that decision will not change. But the future of this family still depends on both of you. Do not let the house become the reason you lose each other. I love you. Both of you. The screen went black. No one spoke for almost a minute. Then Michael finally looked at me.
really looked at me, and quietly asked, "Did you know about the fund?" "No." "Swear?" "I swear." He slowly nodded, and then said something I never expected to hear. "I think I really destroyed everything." And for the first time there was no anger or excuses in his voice, only truth. But the real test was still ahead. Because 2 days later the buyer's lawyer filed an official lawsuit, and the investigation against Michael unexpectedly became much more serious. That's when we realized the problem was far bigger than an illegal house sale.